I want to show you a technique now. It's a very powerful technique. It's called template routing or pattern routing. I'm going to be applying it to the stair project that I've been making videos for you about lately, but this technique is useful in many different applications. So here's the process in a nutshell. We have a stair tread, and there are some curves here. But how do you get those curves nice and smooth and even and square? Well, you could sand that and work it by hand, or you could use the pattern routing technique. So this is an exact duplicate of the shape of the tread that we want. And this piece of cherry is cut to the correct width, but these areas here, the curved areas, are a little bit larger than the template. The wood sticks out a little bit beyond. So the genius of the template routing method is a router bit like this. We're going to be using it in this router table, but it has a bearing on it. So the bearing rides on the edge of the template, and whatever wood is sticking out beyond the template gets milled off. So this bit in a router allows you to duplicate shapes, duplicate the shape of the template. So right now this template is loose. We're going to be putting some finishing nails in here, driven down into what will be the underside of the tread in order to lock them together. And very soon you'll see all that in action. But here's the twist. Just imagine that the pattern is here, and you can see the wood grain is running this way. Now, all router bits revolve like this. The cutter moves this way, and when you're routing, you always move the wood opposite to the direction of the cutters. So, in other words, this bit is going to be traveling like this as it goes around, carving off the wood. And that's good because the grain's running this way, so we're going to be trimming the wood in the direction of the grain. We're going to be patting the dog in the direction of the hair growth, so to speak. But what happens when we get around here? Well, now we're going to be routing against the hair of the dog. And don't be fooled by the wood grain appearance here, by the growth rings. The wood grain still runs this way. So the danger, especially with some hard, thick wood like this, is that this wood will be chipped. Instead of making a nice, smooth curve, there's a very good chance that we're going to break off huge chunks of wood here as we round this corner. So how do you deal with that? Well, imagine for a moment that the template is fastened to the workpiece. This is a flush trimming bit, but it's no ordinary flush trimming bit. It has a bearing on both ends, and that's the sort of secret to making this situation work well when you're routing. Some of the curves with the grain and some of the curves could be against the grain. All you do is you flip it over. And now you adjust the router bit so that the bottom bearing is riding up against the template. Now this was the side that we were going to be routing contrary to the grain, but now look what happens. Now we can route it with the grain. So there's no chance of any chipping or anything. It's going to be smooth results everywhere we want. Including here and here. These are situations that would be very difficult to get smooth results with careful cutting on a bandsaw and then shaping by hand. And yet with the pattern routing technique, and especially this double bearing technique, we're going to get excellent results for all 10 of the treads that we have in mind. The edge will be smooth, that's good, but will also be square. One of the dangers with the sanding approach is that you can round the edge. It's not going to be as precise. But with this method, it works really well. So let's take a look at how it unfolds. Well, you know, when you're building things, it almost never goes perfectly smoothly. And this is one of those unsmooth times. Remember I showed you this bit with the 2 bearings on it. It's a great thing. I love it. But there was a problem that I didn't realize before. And the thickness of the stair tread we're using is a little bit more than the length of the blade. The blade's got to be longer than the thickness of the material you're pattern routing, or else it's not going to work, because, well, the blades just have to completely cross the wood in one pass. So what are we going to do about that? Well, we don't have another bit with 2 bearings that's longer than this. And the last time I looked, there wasn't one made either. So I'm going to look again, because this technique is worthwhile enough that if I can get a longer bit with 2 bearings, then that's the way I want to go. In the meantime, I have chucked in a bit with 1 bearing on it, and the cutter is long enough to mill this thickness of wood, and I've started to mill it here. See, I started over here, and hope you can see how smooth that is. It is perfectly smooth and perfectly square, and then this ridge is where I stopped. So I'm going to continue this so you can see how it works. And because of the rotation of the bit, like I told you before, we're safe to do this curve, and then we're safe to do this curve, and then head on right down here, and we're safe to do this curve too. We're not, strictly speaking, safe to do this curve because we would be routing against the grain. I've done it before, and it can work. I'm not sure I'm brave enough to try it in this case. Working with your hands and making things happen is rarely smooth, and this is one of the little hiccups. Not a big deal. For now, I'll just show you how this works close up, and you can see the beauty of it. Before I do, just take a close look and see how rough this is. Okay, this is an inside curve. It would be very difficult to shape this smoothly and to transition it smoothly with the rest of the tread. But with this technique, it's going to be easy, and the results are going to be great, as you'll see. Now that's what pattern routing is all about. There's a little bit of a burn mark here, but it's no big deal. That'll sand out. And this is now perfectly smooth transition. You can't see a little line there where some lamination occurred, and that's no problem. But this is why we bother making templates and pattern routing, because the results are so good, and especially so fast when you're dealing with, you know, in this case, 10 items. So here's where we're at now. I went ahead and routed against the grain. Most of the time it works. And it did work in this case too, sort of. It did catch the wood a little bit, so there's a little bit of a flaw there. We can sand that out. Nobody's going to know on this extended piece of the stair tread. But it did point out to me that we need to do something differently. But the internet helped out, as it often does, and here's a brand I've never heard of before, Ionica. It'll probably be fine for the little bit of work we have to do now. Maybe it's a great bit, I don't know. Reasonably priced 2-inch long cutter, so that's enough for us. And as you can see, bearing on both sides. So this is one of those times when enthusiasm wants you to continue. You want to keep going, but prudence says, no, wait, wait till you get the proper tool. So we're going to do what we can here. We're going to shift gears, work on something else. There's always lots of work to do. And then in a few days when this bit shows up, we'll go at it again and you'll be able to see this bit in action. Finally got that router bit that you saw. It's got the bearings on both ends of the cutters. We already had a bit like this, as you recall, but the advantage of this bit is that the cutter is wide enough to handle the thickness of material that we're dealing with. So that means we can always cut with the grain and avoid any splintering. The idea of the double bearing bit is that we can flip it over. And now in this orientation, now you can see the wood grain here, now we are cutting in the direction of wood grain instead of against it. We're not cutting this way, which would tend to splinter wood up. We're cutting this way. And the wood is all supported further along the curve, and it's going to be very smooth, guaranteed. There won't be any cut out there, any splitting. So here are the treads, all routed. They're ready for just a gentle sanding on the edges, and then we're going to put a little chamfer around the corners, and they'll be ready for finishing and installation. Thanks for watching. Click here to join the thousands of people who get the Bailey Line Road hands-on how-to newsletter for free every Saturday morning.